So, folks, there has been a story that's been going around today about ballot drop boxes being set on fire. And this is going to be an increasing problem with our current election and possibly with future elections. And that is our system that relies on fundamental, civic trust is breaking down under the threat and under the direct influence of fascist politicians. That's what we're seeing happening here. And yeah, this is pretty unprecedented. You don't usually see direct attacks on the body politic like this, but that is an entire ballot box reduced to ashes on the inside. Absolutely miserable. So, luckily, this is happening with enough time between now and the election that if you happen to have dropped your ballot off, oh God, started playing again. If you happen to have dropped your ballot off in the Clark County elections drop box at the Fisher's Landing Transit Center, if you happen to have done that, there is enough time. You can go and actually look up on the internet what the status of your absentee or mail-in ballot is, so you can check to see whether or not it got burned up or if it made it through. So if you think that your ballot may have been burned, please check its status. You can do that online. It's very easy, okay? But a lot of people might not know that. And one of the things here is that there are going to be, and there already have been, numerous efforts to make this election dangerous or to invalidate votes. We're seeing official methods of trying to do that with voter roll purges. There's actually a story circulating right now about a group. Let me see if I can find the segment here. Yeah, here we go. This is an actual story from like a week or so ago. And it's crazy. We're getting direct acts of attacks, physical attacks on our democracy, like the ballot box being set on fire. But we're also seeing more and more actions along these lines. And this is from CBS. Election protection activist says he plans to flag voters with Hispanic-sounding names as suspicious. Here.
But those claims are part of a national GOP effort to scrutinize and question voter rolls. It's called Protect the Vote, but Democrats say it's really about sowing confusion. Jan Crawford went to North Carolina for our series Democracy Watch and obtained a video with potentially troubling implications.
Last month, the Republican National Committee's Protect the Vote tour rolled into Raleigh, North Carolina with a message.
Only American citizens can vote.
Also, notice, by the way, poll workers and watchers needed, because they're recruiting people to be at the polls, especially in swing states.
The message.
Only American citizens can vote.
To find or stop potential illegal voters, Republicans have filed lawsuits across multiple states, including this one in North Carolina, arguing improperly managed voting lists could open the door for significant numbers of non-citizens to vote.
The North Carolina Board of Elections is refusing to take the steps to take illegal immigrants off the voter rolls.
Echoing political message of the Republican nominee.
And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote.
It is a lie.
I mean, this has been a persistent line from Republican politicians for decades now. And I need to really emphasize here that they have exactly zero evidence of rampant, undocumented immigrant voter fraud. There's just not good evidence for this. If there were millions of undocumented people voting, hundreds of thousands of undocumented people voting, heck, even thousands of undocumented people voting, there would be evidence of that. They would be waving it in your face every single day on every conservative network ever. But they don't have that evidence. Instead, all they have are, innuendo. They just imply that it's happening. They just say outright that it's happening, but then they can't really point to any actual evidence of this widespread, fraud. Every single time that the U.S. government under a conservative administration has tasked a body of lawyers or, a commission to try and find rampant voter fraud, it has failed. And that's just rampant voter fraud of all kinds, let alone a more specific kind of voter fraud that they're alleging here. So, they literally cannot even find evidence. They can't find people to even willing to fabricate the evidence for them. All they have is lies. That's it. At a certain point, there should be some kind of penalty for such shameless falsehoods. It is insane. But this story gets worse.
It is a myth.
But Democrats like Juan Perano, head of the Latino advocacy group LULAC, don't see it that way.
Why would a non-citizen vote?
Latinos are not going to make the trip to the United States and literally put themselves in legal jeopardy by registering to vote and actually voting in an election.
Now, I will say sometimes people do register to vote by accident, because sometimes that can happen. But it is like maybe you could find one or two instances of an undocumented person voting. Maybe. In all of U.S. history.
Non-citizens have registered to vote in the past. Since the last election, several states have taken steps to remove thousands of potential illegal voters from their rolls. But officials...
Yeah, thousands of potential illegal voters. Not thousands of people they knew would be illegally voting. Thousands of potential illegal voters. This is the thing, right? They will remove thousands of people from voter registration because they just happen to think that they might be illegal. They don't need evidence for that. They just, they get that illegal feeling from someone. And you'll be shocked at what kind of criteria they apply to decide whether or not someone may be illegal. I wonder what deeply conservative people would consider suspicious on voter rolls.
Officials say the number of non-citizens who've actually cast votes in federal elections is minuscule. North Carolina identified less than 50 in its most recent audit, although that was in 2016.
Yeah. I'm going to even put doubt on that 50 number. I want to know. You mean you found 50 undocumented immigrants voting in your 2016 election? Or did you find 50 people on the voter rolls who may have been undocumented immigrants?
So usually this is a total non-issue.
We don't believe that there's any proof at all whatsoever that this is a widespread issue. It is illegal to vote if you are a non-citizen.
Don't risk your American dream.
The fight to clean up voter rolls and prevent non-citizens from voting is a focus of conservative election integrity groups who are distributing mailers and hosting in-person events.
They are voters that are most likely to be ineligible or
How do you determine that?
illegal.
What is your
Jim Womack
criteria?
is leading a team of more than 1,800 volunteers in North Carolina.
I just really want to point out here. This guy is leading a team of volunteers. That's just anyone who cared to show up to look for suspicious names on voter registration rolls. You know, I wonder what kinds of people might be deemed suspicious by a bunch of conservatives with enough free time to spend their day looking at voter rolls. I wonder.
Who are combing through voter rolls to identify what they consider suspicious voters.
And you're trying to come up with county by county lists.
It's a list of suspicious voters. Again, not necessarily illegal or ineligible voters, but people that hit our suspicious list.
How do you determine? So you're not even saying they're illegal voters. You're saying they're suspicious voters. What makes them so suspicious?
CBS News obtained a video of Womack discussing how to identify those suspicious voters. We showed it to him to get his explanation.
If you've got folks that that were registered and they're missing information, and they were registered in the last 90 days before the election, and they've got Hispanic sounding last names, that probably is a suspicious voter.
But why would you single out Hispanic sounding last names?
Because he's racist. That's why. He's literally recruited like hundreds of volunteers to look at voter rolls and find minorities to kick off. On really no other basis other than, well, Hispanic last name and they registered recently. That's it. That's it. So if you have registered recently, please go double check it. Anyone with a Hispanic last name, insane. In a just society, this guy would be like put on trial.
In that case, I would have to listen to the full context. The Hispanic sounding last names certainly is not exclusive. Anyone who is lacking the required information,
I'm sorry, what?
In that case, I would have to listen to the full context.
Okay, it is very funny that when directly confronted with this, he's like, well, the context might exonerate me, but, you know, I would need to see the whole thing. You're literally the guy who said the words, man.
Hispanic sounding last names certainly is not exclusive. Anyone who is lacking the required information, we certainly would consider them as a suspicious voter. We are trying to find every illegitimate voter and to challenge the ones that shouldn't be voting.
Womack says he expects his group to challenge at most a few hundred voters. Still, activists like Proano question their motives.
If they have to contest these elections, what they're going to go back to is non-citizen voting. They're laying the groundwork now to contest the election in November.
Yep.
Now, there's...
I mean, I feel like this is basically... I feel like this is basically case closed. We're gonna get to this in later on, but Donald Trump has been saying that he has a secret surprise with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, and people have been speculating what that surprise might be, because he's been talking about it openly and implying that it's going to win him the White House. And, well, what they're going to really double down on, it seems, is causing enough confusion and chaos with the election to, kick it over into what's called a contingent election, which would effectively put the House in control of, who wins the presidency. It's something that's only happened one other time in U.S. history. And it is one of the few ways a president can be legally elected without the Electoral College and without the popular vote. So we'll go into more detail about that in the future here, but part of that strategy relies on sowing chaos and discord. And these people are effectively the foot soldiers of that movement. You have people burning ballot boxes. You have people, throwing people off of voter rolls. You have people trying to create and fabricate this narrative of mass voter fraud. It's going to get a lot worse in like the next few days here. We only have a handful of days until the election. And what we're really seeing here is an American brown shirt movement. We're seeing like the foot soldiers of fascism come out of the woodwork to try and rig this election in favor of Donald Trump. That's what we're seeing. I do think that Kamala Harris will still win, but if it's remotely close, we're going to see a lot of bullshit from conservatives, both, on the ground local conservatives, but also on the national level and on the state level. It's going to be overwhelming. And yeah, they're basically trying to fuck it all up so completely that it goes to the House. That is kind of my interpretation of the data here. And I don't think they'll succeed, which is the good news. But it's gonna be infuriating and deeply frustrating, and also they're gonna get a lot more racist, which seems impossible. It seems like we've hit the absolute bottom of the barrel here. They're just gonna keep going through the barrel. Okay? And that's what's gonna happen here. And yeah, it really is. It really is shocking. I mean, like, one of the bigger things here was this story coming out a couple days ago. Jeff Bezos wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post. The hard truth: Americans don't trust the news media. A note from our owner, which is rich because Jeff Bezos personally prevented the Washington Post from endorsing Kamala Harris. That, a billionaire owner of a newspaper that interferes with that newspaper's independence, yeah, there's a reason why Americans don't trust the news media. And it's specifically that, along with, conservative disinformation campaigns. Like it is, we are in basically a period of time that defies parody. You can't make parody of this. It is a parody of itself. Do you think they'll start looking for us trans folks too? Will they deem us suspicious and call us mentally unstable to vote? I mean, if I'm being completely honest, Thoughtful Toffee, I think that when it comes to trans people, we're too small of a demographic for them to worry about electorally. But if I do believe that as things get worse and get prone to more chaos, we're going to see conservatives emboldened or enraged enough to pose a significant threat to the life and well-being of trans people. It would not surprise me to see an uptick in anti-trans violence. It would not surprise me for conservatives to feel emboldened to attack trans people physically. And so please, as we get closer to the election, if you are a vulnerable minority, please be careful, because they're not just going to stop with ballot boxes. If they're willing to burn votes, they're sure as hell willing to burn us. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, unfortunately. That is sadly my interpretation here. Yeah. So with that being said, we need to be sure to arm ourselves with truth, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and our vulnerable neighbors. I'm both Mexican and trans, Lamau. Please be careful. I know mental illness doesn't, but neither does having a Hispanic last name. Well, it's a lot harder for, conservatives to determine whether you're mentally ill just from looking at you. That tends to be why they latch on to things like race, frankly. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, well, I'm hitting the segment button. I have no words to close it out. It's just really bad. And election violence, I think, is going to increase rather than decrease, sadly.